Greetings, traveler. I am Sir Nox, the teller of tales. Would you like to hear one? Before we get started, please consider subscribing to the channel as it helps immensely. And if you already have, thank you. You're amazing. This one is called Weird Guy PvP Murders and Gets a Salty. Extra long. We like 'em extra long. Wait, hold up. So, one of my favorite systems to play/run for is World of Darkness. Usually ends up just running most of them unless it's Hunter the Vigil, which was a game a former friend of mine loved to run. So I figured I wanted to try playing in a few non-Hunter world games and go on Roll20 to see what's available. I check out two different things. One, a demon, the fallen game, needing a GM. I was here to play, but that was a game I normally couldn't convince my other group to play, so I wanted to try it out. And a Victorian Age vampire game. This was where I made first contact with one of the strangest neckbeardiest players I've ever had the displeasure of meeting. Now, to be fair to the man who I won't give the Roll20 handle of for anonymity's sake, and will refer to only as Edgelord from here on out. Most of the other players in both of these games were pretty weird too, and we'll 100% get stories on them later, as they devolved into some of the weirdest things I've ever damn seen in gaming, minus my short stint DMing for a college group, which will also get future stories. But this guy kind of just sticks out the most in my memory of this weird saga of my gaming history. Anyways, let me explain the situation with the two games. The Victorian one being advertised was being done so by a different guy who Edgelord just happened to be a player in. Whilst Edgelord had explicitly made the post looking for a Demon the Fallen storyteller, after doing a bunch of prep work for the Demon the Fallen game and getting ready to run, I'm basically told he found someone else because he went and had me on board and made me do a ton of paperwork for nothing, which kind of pissed me off, but they needed another player anyway, so I said whatever and joined in with a total Chad Jim bro. The game lasted literally only 2 sessions before the GM he found dropped off the face of the planet, so on to the Victorian vampire game where I start to really notice the edgelord tendencies of this player. It was a quasi-Camarilla game set in England during the French-Indian War, or something. I had wanted to play a Nosferatu, but was shot down because the GM has a hatred of Nosferatu for some reason. So I went with a French Toreador, who suffered from a facial disfigurement and took extra clan discipline obfuscation so I could still do stealth stuff. Took a few dots and contacts of the homeless and had a sewer haven, so I was basically a Nosferatu anyways. The important part of his build though was that he was a 9th generation vampire, which means he could spend 2 blood points a turn. This will become important later. Edgelord brought in a 10th gen Assamite. You might already see where this is going. Honestly, I have no idea, I've never even heard of this game. So I go through the game really not liking it much, and I have all my criticisms shot down by the GM who is currently favoring the only female player super hard. And I start talking to Edgelord via private messages as he seems to be the only other guy not quite liking the game. And I knew him from the Demon game where it never got far enough for him to show his true colors. He starts saying some weird weeb edgelord stuff, but nothing that had set off red flags yet, until one day his character randomly walks into the room where the rest of the group is, pulls out his sword and threatens the lot of us for no real reason at all. My guy pulls his sword out and backs away, asking him to put down his sword before one of them gets hurt. He immediately rolls to attack me and one-shots me into torpor and disables me. The GM doesn't even seem fazed by this as I loudly ask, what the hell? The GM just says this is the world of darkness and Edgelord was just defending himself because I took my sword out. I tried to private message Edgelord while talking to the GM about what the crap, and he doesn't really give a shit either. The GM starts getting angry at me, questioning this, and I just leave the game and server. Seeing as I was now getting involved in other games with the Edgelord, I decided to make peace by telling him I didn't really mind as I was hating that game anyways. Bad idea. Later, after several failed game attempts between the groups, one of the players from Demon, who I had not got along with well at first, but later became friends with, decided to run a modern-day vampire game in Berlin. And knowing edgelord will be there, I remake one of my old hunter characters as a vampire, to give him a higher survivability rate if it comes to PvP again. I ask if it's okay to make him Le Sombre, as in recent lore they have joined the Camarilla. He says okay, but that in his lore they are still pretty firmly Sabbat and anti-Rebus. Aren't trusted, so I would have to hide my identity. This is a tough read, I'm not gonna lie. I thought this was okay. My character also had a backstory that made him have an active vengeance and the want to murder his sire because he killed my character's family. Had a whole interesting story worked in about a mentor of his who tried to keep him from going after his sire, and how she was secretly the sire of his sire who trying to atone for her mistakes by keeping my character from going off of humanity, from how hard vengeance was driving him. Kind of a Moby Dick-like story where his sire was the white whale that was destroying his very humanity, which was ultimately the sire's goal to drive him into being the ultimate predator and a worthy Le Sombre. Edgelord's character was a literal Nazi Ventrue pimp. Now he was only 1 year embraced, but for some reason a neo-Nazi who constantly in character complained about the path of humanity and how much he wished he could go on the path of power so he could get away with mass murder, assault, and diablerie. Diablerie. That's a new word for me, diablerie. What is that? I was super confused by this already. Now there was also a female player who I later found out to be about as weird as the edgelord, but that's another story, who decided to play like an appearance for Malkavian with split personality. So it's revealed later he took the no reflection flaw for his Ventrue. This becomes important later, but my character immediately has questions based on this. My character had always been careful around mirrors and even subtly used shadow play to help hide mirrors whenever he went into a room to maintain the persona of a Ventrue. And he tries to presence me right there with Presence 3, but botches, meaning I'm immune to entrancement for the rest of the game, which made me super happy. Anyways, I basically tell him I'm a Ventrue with the same flaw, and played up that I was just intrigued to find another like me. This way, I can kind of be a little bit less focused on keeping away from mirrors around just them. So every session, edgelord starts going out of his way to sex RP with the Malkavian on his turns, forcing us all to listen, and I start going to the GM more to try and get him to do something. Anything to make this stop, because it's uncomfortable as hell. He decides to have the Malkavian's mentor find out and take her away, and force a Valderi to stop the blood bond. As soon as she gets out, the edgelord uses Presence 3, or some crap to basically have the same effect anyways, so this continues. I partially blame the GM for not just directly telling him to stop, but that's not really the point. And after this weird cult group that I later find out my sire is working for, edgelord almost immediately betrays the Camarilla and the group to go find them with his mind-dominated Malkavian sex slave. He tries to become a secret agent for them, but I find out and tell the guy standing in for the prince to get some brownie points. And because I kind of know my sire is working with that group and I want to have more resources to go after them with. When they bring him in for questioning, he blurts out that I'm a Le Sombre, and I just get freaking confused and try to say that's metagaming, and he makes up a bunch of whining and excuses until the GM decides to allow that blurt. And the prince stand in mind, reads me and finds out. So now we are both on the chopping block and decides to have us go on a end our lives mission to kill the heads of the cults if we want to avoid execution. One of the leaders is my sire, and I've been told I will gain Camarilla membership and legality to stay if I bring proof of my killing him. So this is still not too bad of a deal. We eventually find him, and of course, the freaking guy tries to leave me alone in a room by running away. I solo my sire to death through pure dumb luck and rage, and we never have another session since the GM messaged me that nobody else besides me was really interacting with the story, or giving him anything other than the freaking sex RP. The Malkavian player later says she's gonna run a mage game. Right around the same time, I get my V5 book in and decide I'll run V5 on a different day for the group. I'll just quickly run through the part of the mage game that really focuses on edgelord. I'm wondering when we get to a point here, honestly. He was playing a leather-clad, knife-wielding lesbian biker mortician Euthanatos. I was basically playing Harry Dresden as an Order of Hermes member. Some dumb stuff in the game led to him having some weird born-out-of-magic child whom he decided to give to an orphanage, as he saw this life as too dangerous and unpredictable to raise a child in. And then the edgelord immediately knifes my character because of that. Doesn't ask, say, or do anything, just knifes him repeatedly until he dies on the floor. At this point, I'm freaking done with the game, but I stayed long enough to watch the game fall apart from this decision, as one of the other players was a detective character who almost instantly deduced what had happened and called the police, getting his character arrested. The GM decided to make a retcon to keep the game going. Did he retcon the murder? No. Did he retcon the detective solving it? No. He retconned him having called the police over the brutal knife murder of a fellow practitioner. Anyways, while this was going on, I was running my V5 game. I was short on people willing to play, and I invited some guys from the other groups, which sadly meant edgelord would come. I started explaining the rule changes V5 brought in, and he cut me off saying every 15 seconds or so to say how gay or dumb it was. I tried to ignore it and remain calm. Anyways, character creation time. He decides he wants to play a thin blood, but he doesn't want to deal with the thin blood discipline rules. I decide to work with this and allow him discipline affinity in 2 different disciplines so long as he gives up the ability to gain discipline dots from blood resonance. I'm wondering where the D&D is. Obviously, this isn't D&D, but maybe that's what you should play. It seems like there's more people willing to play and you won't have such a limited pool of players. This sounds like a terribly complicated and not fun game at all. Why are you playing it? Around this time, the Malkavian from the last game pops in saying she wants to play a Torador, and he immediately starts shifting his build to force blood bond her again when I drop the bombshell on him that thin bloods can't do that without a special thin blood merit that you have to take a thin blood flaw for, whatever that is. He, without thinking, chooses Clan Curse Tremere for some dumb reason. Honestly, as someone who has no familiarity with this game at all, there's a lot of term dropping and jargon that is just, I can't follow. Hopefully the listener can. We've gotten this far, might as well continue. Which directly means you can't blood bond other vampires, and I tell him this, and he gets super mad. I also tell him straight up that I won't allow him to do what he got away with in the last game, which sets him off on a tangent about player choice, but he eventually huffs down and agrees to play. He makes the most weeb backstory ever that I force him to tone down by a ton, and then we start. Almost the entire time, he acts like an edgelord and withholds stuff and won't really work with other players, save the Torador, who it's obvious he's trying to get into the pants of, despite his character having a touchstone he supposedly loved. To try and keep down the drama of having to kick him out from trying the same shit, I decide to just keep splitting the party up for missions. Keep him with the Tremere player, who I knew well, IRL, and keep the Torador with the other player. He's pretty mad by this, but whatever. Eventually, he gets mad he doesn't have a ghoul since he took the ghouling merit. I tell him he took a conviction against drugs and a conviction against slavery, and making a ghoul kind of goes against both of those things. Now, I think this is partially brought on by the Torador having accidentally made a ghoul to save an NPC's life, but he thinks he found some way around his convictions. He asks me where he can find the toughest biker bar in town. I look up biker gangs in Chicago and find a group called the Outlaws and say there's an outlaw bar not too far off, but he shouldn't go there. His character is a scrawny guy wearing a hoodie, and they won't really let him in there. So the cab driver NPC tells him to not go there, as I'm trying to make it clear this is a bad idea. Then the doorman tries to not let him inside, but he blood buffs his social stats to get inside. The bartender refuses to serve him, saying he should leave now so they don't have to clean his body off the floor. An old man next to him tells him to leave, as I'm trying to give him every chance to escape whatever asinine plan he has built. He instantly starts picking fights with people in the bar and says he wants to know who the biggest, toughest guy here is. After everyone in the bar has basically come to the conclusion that this man was insane, they go to the biggest guy there to kick him out, and edgelord starts pounding on him with physical disciplines and blood buffs. His plan, as far as I can gather, is to knock this guy out, drag him outside, and ghoul him. because he seems to think that if it's a criminal, it somehow nullifies his convictions. He also thinks he can walk outside after beating the shit out of one of their members. Anyways, after rolling for a ridiculous amount of disciplines and blood buffs, he has enough hunger that he finally messy crits. It just happens to be while this guy is on his last dot of health. Now I ask if he wants to do anything about the messy willpower can be spent to reroll some dice, or you can turn into a failure, and he decides not to, so I describe as the final punch was done at super speed as he had celerity activated and spun the man's head around, snapping his neck. The man drops, everyone in the bar looks down for a moment at the body before looking back up at him, and began pulling out their weapons. He says he's gonna run out, and I ask him if he deactivates celerity or keeps it on. He says he keeps it on as he runs out at superhuman speed in front of literally dozens of witnesses. He then angrily messages me after I tell him I got to find a consequence for the masquerade breach, so he might want to prep a new character just in case. He then starts telling me that I had directly told him this wouldn't be a masquerade breach and had okayed this with him, and I get super freaking confused and tell him that didn't freaking happen, and he must be talking about something he had prepared with another GM. And he keeps trying to put words in my mouth, and when that doesn't work, he starts claiming I'm an alcoholic because I keep a glass of red wine when I run vampire games, and I basically tell him to shut up and calm down or I won't have him in my game. He eventually calms down and comes back, and I decide to try and have mercy on him by saying an anarch tremor. Many of them exist after the falling of the pyramid. Whatever that is, was present in the bar and stole the security tape and used powers to keep down most of the masquerade breach. Though many of the bikers still want him dead, they think the super speed was just PCP or some crap. The tremor then tells him that because he did this and because he still has copies of the tape, he basically belongs to him until further notice. He for some reason took this as him being an anarch now, which wasn't the case at all, and starting acting pretty screw the camera-ish. Anyways, after he pisses off most of the NPCs in the game, I finally decide I have had enough and make up a challenge I know he will die from if he keeps acting like an edgelord. A Bruja, whose touchstone was the person he killed, kidnaps his touchstone and tells him to meet him at the bar. He gives him plenty of time and never says to meet alone, so a normal player would get the rest of the group to go for this. He decides to only call the Torador and go in. He almost immediately gets ass stomped by the Bruja and dies because he wouldn't go to the other guys for help and mostly just wanted the Torador to witness his coolness. He then complains in message about how shit of a GM and player I am, and how horrible V5 is before I finally block him, having had enough. Now I admit I acted childish at parts, but this guy just kind of weirded me out. Oh, was that the end? Finally! Okay, yes, obviously, he's an annoying player. You need to play a new game. The fact that the other player keeps following after he gets all salty is weird. The fact that there's only seems to be 2 people that play this game, and they all suck, tells me you should play a more popular game. Fine, I don't know, there's plenty of vampires you can put in D&D, why don't you do that? Why do you put yourself through such misery, and then put me through such a long, pointless story? I'm only kidding. I don't know, I feel like you need a new game. I'm sorry, you might really like this game, but obviously no one else cares, and there's no one playing it, so find something more popular, and do a homebrew. Make it your own. I'm sure you'll find plenty of people, and you won't be limited to only 2 humans on the entire planet that seem to care about this game. Well, that's all our tales for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so, as it helps the channel immensely. Anyways, if you'd like to hear some more tales, come back and I shall tell you some.